Alright, this is just another one of those unscripted videos. We're gonna give this a shot, see how it turns out. In the Metroid Prime Frigate task that was just released, there might be something interesting that people may or may not have noticed. I'm just gonna play it, and we'll see if you catch it. Did you catch it? Just one more time. I guess I'll do it at slow speed. I'm sure that most people are seeing this, but you may have missed it when you watch the full video just because there's so many things going on. But right here, there is an Aether bunny hop off the Aether floor. There's no collision here to jump off of, there's just the Aether, which if you're watching this video I'm just taking for granted you do know what Aether is. But how the hell is that possible? Like, what are we watching here? So I just wanted to try and convey this a bit. So first off, here's World Editor. Here's the Aether, like coordinates, I guess, marked in red. So, you know, if you go past this wall, you'll enter Aether and start very slowly floating upwards. Likewise, if you go below this bottom floor, you'll enter Aether, start very slowly floating upwards. When you reach the top of this Aether, you'll start bouncing in and out of it. Each time you bounce up, you have a 2-frame window to jump, and that's pretty much everything you need to know. Aether acts like floor, so while you're on it, you lose speed. Each frame you're landing, you lose some. If you'll recall the video I uploaded, if you jump every other frame, you lose speed at half the rate, but that's not quite what's happening, because jumping every frame also makes you ascend upwards at half the rate, which is kind of a funny trade-off. Anyway, I figured I'd open this just Photoshop image of an L-jump. This is, you know, just the arc you follow. Each one of these is one frame. And something really interesting about video game physics that like doesn't happen in real life, and that's that frames are really defined things. Like, time itself isn't really fluid, it's very rigid. So I'm just gonna try to use this as an example of what was done to like convey how precise and absurd it was. So that trick doesn't look too impressive, especially if you don't know what's going on. But it was really hard to do. It took a long time, and it was kind of like, this is the first time it's ever really been used in a task, a sort of grounded Aether jump. Aether jump bunny hop, I should say. So, first off, I'm just going to move this. We're going to pretend that this is the Aether floor. And everything before this part of the jump isn't really too important, it's just the falling factor. So, as you can see, each frame of the jump after the apex accelerates downwards, which means that there's more distance covered downwards per frame. And the way that the Aether works is the first frame you're below it, that's the position you stop at. So in this frame, right here, we're above the Aether, and in this one we're below it. And if you fall into the Aether like this, you'll start here and have to slowly accelerate upwards at a rate much, much, much slower than you fell into it at. So with this line, we can sort of imagine that, say we're above it on this frame, and then below it on this frame. We're really, really close to it, which means floating up into the Aether to get a jump would take a lot less time. Obviously, this isn't exactly to scale. The amount of in-game units you're falling is a lot more than the amount of pixels on display, so like I can't get the fine details that I would need to really convey this. But what's really important is that the longer you're falling, the larger the gap is of possible positions to land in the Aether. This is the frame you land and the position you land at. What I'm going to do here is move this instead, because I think leaving the Aether at a static position works better. So where your jump started off has this range of potential spots you can land at. There's nothing you can do to influence the rate that you accelerate downwards at. So wherever you are here in the y-axis being up and down, which is technically the z-axis in the game, and I'm going to use y because that's kind of standard. Wherever you are in the y-axis, here determines where you are here. There's nothing you can do during this time to fall slower or faster. So if you're positioning in the very start of your jump, really, the last time that you have any influence over how high you're going to be is where you jump from. Which again, we can ignore this because, like, you know, It's not the most relevant thing. Technically, if you jumped here, you know, you'd probably land in the Aether down here, but I'm not going to remake this chart to display that. What really matters is that we land in the Aether exactly like this, so that the positioning we're at is just fractions of a unit away from the top Aether, such that Samus can float to the top Aether the frame after landing. And in order to do that, there's some really specific stuff going on in the dash, which is hard to convey, but I'm just gonna try and show. So this dash here was all that matters. After L is released here, nothing can be done about how high up we are when we land. It's all in this dash. So like, the way that I interacted with the collision here, the way that I bent the dash, when I released L, because dashing changes the rate that you accelerate up and down at, so I guess I kind of lied about the jump thing, but bear with me. And how high up I was here, all of that stuff matters. And it just so happens that it is actually possible to hit the Aether floor at, where would my position be? This exact height here. Which, like, to the decimal point really matters. Because when I float up, it changes by, like, what? Did it even change? It might have gone up by, like, no. It goes up by, like, fractions of a unit. Like, the numbers back here are changing, but this display doesn't show them. Because position values are actually a lot more complicated than just 3 digits. It was absurdly precise. Like, crazy. So, hopefully if you missed that, you can now appreciate it. Technically, this type of thing could be taken advantage of non-TAS. If you always fall into the Aether from the same piece of collision, you can consistently fall the same distance downwards. So maybe people can look into that if they ever need to. But for TAS, it's specifically interesting because, especially when dashing, we have a lot of losing my voice talking. We have a lot of influence over how much height we have in a TAS, especially also if you're jumping from the Aether wall, or this area here, you can kind of enter at a bunch of different positionings and jump off at different positionings with different, you know, places that you land. But again, to reiterate, what really matters is that you just barely go below the Aether when you land, which is really precise because you have no influence on anything once you start falling. So hopefully that ramble was sufficient. I think I'll end it here.